All right, so welcome to episode 26 of Unplanned with Phil Bland, and today I'm lucky to have Steph Chamberlain.
Hello.
And thank you for joining me. So I thought we'd kind of go into a bit of the background of Steph's business journey, and she's set up her own company, and some of her 15 years ago, so we can talk about that journey that you've had, and also the experience of, I guess, growing, having a family, going through multiple crises with the financial crisis and COVID and things. So we can dive into a bit of that stuff as well. So welcome to the show.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for having me. Really excited. Thank you, Phil.
No worries. So I guess I've been kicking these things off. It's a bit for me trying to document also how people are feeling at this time, because it's such a crazy time for everyone. So I guess we could just kick off with how's lockdown been for you? How are you feeling? How's it affecting business? How's kind of family life? How's that all working?
So business is actually not bad. I thank the Lord. I'm not religious, but I'm just thanking him anyway, because I think that's what you do in a crisis like this. And basically, we lost one client, but everyone else stayed on the same ship, so we're all good. So on business terms, but there was a moment of I wasn't quite sure if we were going to make it, because you don't know what client's going to do. Literally, after the global financial crisis, people just pulled things with hardly any notice. So it was a kind of shaky time. I'm a bit of a fan of Rishi, I've got to say, for the stuff that he rolled out, all the business support. I thought, to be honest, it's kind of, for a Conservative government, it was almost kind of unbelievable what they announced.
Yeah.
You
would have thought that they would have been more of the free market economy. Let the weak ones crash.
Let them fail.
If they should have been planning for this.
Yeah, it's like Darwinism. Let the weak fail.
But no, they've kind of propped. It's funny because it's not necessarily an unprecedented event, because it happened 100 years ago. I mean, people could have been planning for this type of thing, and some companies have been, but it's good that they provided the support to people. And I think a lot of people are feeling, to be honest, I don't think a lot of people would have behaved themselves or followed the guidance if they would have just gone out to work. So
yeah, so it was good. So good on Rishi, well done.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, that I don't think people probably, unless you have a business, they probably don't appreciate quite the load there was at that point. And the fact that he lifted that was pretty cool, because as we know from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're worried about that kind of stuff, then you can't do anything else. You can't get out of that mire. So that was cool.
Sure. Yeah.
I am a mother of two, so I have I nearly said a 5-year-old then, nearly 4-year-old, so 3-year-old going on 4, and a 7-year-old, nearly 8. So they're just at that. I'm very thankful for the fact that the little one can now do things like wipe her own bottom, not quite feed herself, but she can't go and make herself a sandwich. The other one can, and the older one has kind of embraced the new responsibility. But it was interesting, the first week she said she was really upset, and I was kind of I wonder what's wrong with her, and she was like, "Mummy, it's really hard because I have to look after Erin." And you realise that there's there's 2 of us in this house. My husband is director of innovation for Kantar, so he's got a fairly meaty job. And I can't stop, so we're looking after the kids, but we're doing it on shifts, and so we're having to compartmentalize what we do. But essentially, some of the childcare is coming down to my 7, not even 8-year-old yet.
They've got to step up.
They have to step up, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm feeling the pressure, and my poor little girl's feeling it too. But actually, you know what? It's really great, because she's managed to teach her things. And the other day, Erin was pretty much showing me how she could read in inverted commas, but she started to see things like ooh sounds and things, and I'm sure that Jamie's had a little bit to do with that. So I think people learn through teaching, and to give them that kind of role is pretty good. It probably helps their education. So I'm a bit more relaxed about the education side, because obviously we're homeschooling as well. I'm really lucky that my husband has taken on the majority of that, because I think that would have like felled me if I'd have had to do that as well.
Yeah.
And that's been going really well, so that's fine. But I'm saying all this, and it's like, this is quite, you know, we're quite far into lockdown, right? So in about the second week, I like totally fell apart and was just like a crying mess. As I've been told other people had that too. Like for some people, it took a bit longer for them to kind of totally unravel. But my sort of style is, I unraveled for about 3 days and then pulled my socks up and then went, right, where's the opportunity?
Well,
and I think that's
you sort of realize that you don't have a choice anyway, so you've got to make the best of a bad situation.
Yeah. So that's where I'm.
Wow. So yeah, I guess magic milestones. So it's like, 15 years, 16 years, is it? So
it's not quite that yet. Just under that. So it's not.
Okay.
I'm not quite there yet. But
yeah,
a lot of years. I was only 29 when I. Oh God, I've just given away my age on a live podcast. Rookie error. But yeah, I was 29.
Did you always have the kind of entrepreneurial gene? Did you ever think I'm gonna work for a company, or what? Like, how did you come up with the decision to go in this path that you've gone on for all these years?
Well, it's funny because I always thought I wasn't from a very entrepreneurial family, because my mum my mum's like a customer service phone person, not anymore, she's retired, and my dad's an electrician. And all of my family, we're from the Black Country, so it's pretty, in the Black Country, most people are doing kind of quite sturdy jobs, good, working men jobs. Yeah. But my great grandfather on the one side was he had a lorry business during the war. So I guess as an entrepreneur, somewhere in my background that I never really thought about before. And it's interesting, my mom said things to me before, like, your granddad said never have a business partner.
Oh, right.
He was, so she says things like that to me, and I'm like, oh, granddad's got advice for me even beyond the grave. That's kind of freaky.
Yeah.
I don't agree with him, by the way.
Did you take that? Did you take that advice?
No, I totally didn't. I didn't. At first, I didn't have a business partner. There's part of the story actually that I'll come on to, but it's kind of weird that you get these kind of beyond the grave bits of advice. And I didn't think I was very entrepreneurial until somebody reminded me the other day that when I was about 8, I had a magazine called Yes at school that I sold for 20 pence. Or it might even have been 5 pence. Can't quite remember what the exchange rate was. But again, I'm just showing my age here. But I must have had some kind of entrepreneurial thing going on, because I was obviously making a little bit of money, and I was also into media, and I didn't know what the word media meant at that point. So I obviously had a thing about newspapers and writing and creativity and making money, and that's kind of what I do now.
And I guess media is like, it can be any medium of communication.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, it's just the means of kind of telling stories and things.
Totally. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
So, and I guess that's kind of what we're doing here as well. It's just kind of telling the story.
Telling my story.
Yeah. So how did you kind of come about with the idea of magic milestones? Was it
so I was fired.
Oh, right.
So let me set the scene here. So okay. I'm 29, and before I had kids, I think there's this interesting thing that happens to women in particular, maybe men a little bit too. When you have kids, I was a very alpha female, knew what I wanted, really ambitious, and so I got really high really quickly. So I ended up on the board of a web agency in London at the age of 29. And and it just wasn't culturally a great fit for me, right? So very often you don't realize until you look back on your career that there's places that you can be where it's a great fit, and then there's places where it just doesn't suit your style. And I'd worked at this point for a number of web agencies in Spitalfields Market, early 2000s, when it was all just totally crazy. And then I went on to work for the BBC. I was really lucky. So I was program manager for mobile. I worked on content management systems, rolled out a content management system across the whole of radio for web stuff. So I'd had this fantastic career to date, and then I went on to Channel 4, and that was awesome too, doing more sort of hardcore technology projects. And then I moved back to the Midlands because that was where my husband was. And I was kind of a bit ready to settle down and have kids at that point, I thought. And then I kind of freaked out, and I was like, no. So I left the job I was in, and then, no, actually I didn't, sorry, I'll backtrack. I was headhunted by the CEO of this business, right? But he was a typical entrepreneur, a bit like me, and that he just kind of went, I really like this person. I could really see that she's got something about her, and I would just want her into my business. So he brought me into the business, but I don't think he really thought through exactly what my place was going to be and whether I was a good fit. So he brought me in, and actually I was a terrible fit. And it kind of just rocked the boat, and like I say, just didn't work. So I lost my job with hardly any money. Like they literally gave me like 5 days money or something. And I remember, like, there's always that moment of, even though I wanted them to let me just go my own way, because it was really it was just hard working in that area where you're not culturally fitting. There's always like that element of how dare them find me, I'm amazing.
Yeah, just kind of on that, it's like there's something about people's ego that makes them think that they need to fit into every situation or every group, and it's also kind of a young thing. Like as you get older, you, I guess, realize that you don't need everyone to like you, and you're also not meant to fit in with everyone, and it's okay, and you don't kind of take it to heart. Like a lot of people take, if you didn't fit maybe with that culture, but it doesn't mean that you're not a very capable person that can make a big impact and a contribution. It's just that it wasn't the right place for you. And a lot of people take those situations or those experiences and maybe
internalize them, think it's all about them.
They think it's their problem. And that could be a kind of real problem, because then they kind of take that into next situation or whatnot, and then it kind of damages them, when actually they should just put it into perspective and be like, it wasn't right for me, and I'm glad that I'm not in that situation anymore.
Totally. There's probably loads of people in that situation now. So for anyone listening that's going through the COVID thing and they've just had the redundancy thing, it's like, okay, it's a bit of a crap time to be made redundant, but hopefully you get some money behind you. Opportunity, right? So, but if you're in the situation I was in where you got nothing, then there's still opportunity. It's fine. And like you say, it's just like, see it as a sign from the universe that you weren't meant to be there. It's a bit like when people break up with people, right? And they get really, when you're young and you get dumped or something and you think it's all about you. And there's 2 people in a relationship. So it's only half about you. So don't beat yourself up, because it was only half about you, and it was mostly about the interaction between you and another human being. And if that wasn't right, that's actually the problem. It's like it's the process's fault, not the people. Like, so when something goes wrong on a program or project, it's rarely the fact that everyone's not very good at their job. Sorry, I was about to swear. It's normally it's normally because the process doesn't support what everyone's trying to do. So it's no one person's fault. And just, in terms of what Magic Milestones now does, that's what we do. We make a process and a structure for teams to support the best outcome for product delivery. And we do tech product delivery.
Right.
And that's kind of what I do, really, is I tell people, it's okay to be yourself. It's totally okay, because it's really hard work being somebody else. It's just not worth it.
It's not just okay to be yourself. It's like the optimal, because you're not spending any time pretending to be someone that you're not.
Yeah, and it's overhead. It's just an overhead that you just don't need. So if you're so anyone listening who's in a job where they're having to be somebody else but themselves, then that's a really good indicator that you need to find a place that fits you. And millennials are great at this. I think as Gen Xers, we kind of have, at least me, I can only speak for myself, but you know, I grew up in a really solid working class house where it was kind of like you're really lucky to have a job. So, you know, it's kind of like almost the wrong way around. Whereas the millennials are like, you tell me why I should work here. You know, and I, you know, and in some ways I'm like a bit like, what? But in the other ways I'm like, good point. Well done. That's a good point. Why should I, you know, why should you work here? That's a really good, it's a two-way street.
Well, you only get one life, so your time's so precious. And so it's like, you know, I get one chance at this. I get a certain number of years that I can work. So, and there's many, many companies that I could choose to align myself with, or groups and things. So where do I think that I'm going to make the biggest impact, or where do I think that my contribution is going to be valued? And that's why it's important. Like, that's why I think, you know, millennials probably think that way, because they've realized that time's limited.
Yeah. Totally. And it's 8 hours a day. I mean, it's kind of a lot of your life. And I think people are realizing that now, that they spent like a lot of their life commuting, and now that they haven't had to do that, they've realized just what they can gain, like being able to go and run or spend more time with their kids. And I kind of, you know, that whole thing where everyone's like, what's your purpose? I sort of spent a long time thinking about what my purpose was, vaguely thinking it was all a bit, you know, BS. But I actually realised that my whole purpose, what I do, is to make sure that people can go to work, and in those 8 hours, there's very little stuff that is impacting their kind of demeanour, their health, you know, in terms of how they feel. Because the last thing that anyone should do is go to work and then be in an environment where they can't be their absolute best. So when I go and work with a team, I'm doing everything for the sake of that team and that organisation. So I go in and I say, okay, so how can we structure this team to be the best and most optimum for everyone's talent and for what we need to do here? How can we get that right? Then how do we make sure if someone hasn't got the competency in the role they're in, how can we train them or coach them into it? Because if someone's in the right place, but they just haven't got the skills, that's easy to fix. Then if there's gaps, we can recruit people. So that's the next bit. Then empathy. Can we, you know, what's the team dynamics? Can we improve the team dynamics? And some of that stuff's so easy to do. Like, it's not easy if you don't know how to do it, but if you know how to do it, it's literally 2 days. It's a 2-day course. Get a team in a room, even virtually, you can work wonders, right? So, and then alignment. So then what's the team's purpose, let alone your own? And are those individuals in the team, is their purpose aligned with the team's purpose? Because if not, you know, maybe there's a bit of happening. And then what's the measures around that? And then finally, what's the method? And everyone talks about Agile right now. Yeah, so that's the current thing. But and I'm a big fan. I've done it since the year 2000. But there are other methods, and there will be other methods, and there's other stuff that comes out all the time. The scaling Agile, which we do because we're generally working on big programs of like 35 million, that kind of level. So you know, that method at the end is at the end though. So all the stuff I've just talked about is all about people. And the bit at the end, what generally happens is everyone focuses on that method bit. It's all about the how, and they get really, especially when we're technical. I put myself in that bracket. So if you're technical, you're focused on those methods. But actually, it took me till about 2016, 17 to work out it's not about the methods. It's about the people. And you get 60% more productivity by focusing on the people. Like, that's an easy win, right?
Yeah.
Going Agile will give you about 40%. You focus on the people.
Yeah, and it's not just the people in terms of like the skills that the people have. It's really actually a lot of the time, if people have the right attitude, they can upskill themselves pretty quickly. It's often about their ability to work with a team. and be productive, you know. And yeah, people don't think enough. People are very often kind of in their own heads, and they think on an individual basis, but really nothing ever gets done without kind of a high performing team working together, and knowing how to do that and how to think things through, kind of forward plan for things and consider each other's opinions and that type of thing. You never get to the right answer unless you have a group of people in the room.
Absolutely, totally.
Yeah. I've actually found that as well. One of the, you know, I've been working on that. I've mentioned before, I was working on this project, and there's something, you know, having worked in consulting and in project teams my whole career, you know, I went off and did a solo project, and it's something you don't realize how much you miss about work. It's really about two things. It's about the relationships that you have with all of the people that you're kind of in a team with, and kind of sparking ideas off of smart people. And then it's like the work that you're doing and like what you're building or what you're creating and what kind of impact it's going to have, whether it's for a client or kind of a consumer product or those types of things.
Am I allowed to do a quick plug on that basis?
Go for it.
So there's a company called 2 Days Mood. I've just noticed this here. So there you go. 2 Days Mood. And essentially, if people, what we're talking about is if people are happy, they're productive. Right, what 2 Days Mood is, they just do these really quick super surveys so you can check whether a team's happy. And we use those to make sure we baseline at the start of the engagement, and then we check it all along to the end to make sure that we've moved the dial on that. Because like I say, you can structure a team, you do all that stuff, but actually, so that gives you 60% more productivity, and then 40% from doing better methods. But equally, if people are happy, then you'll get an increase that way too. So there's all these multiple methods. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because the way you increase productivity isn't to stand over people and get them to fill in loads of reports. It's just totally not that. It's about giving them the environment. It's about giving them a garden to flourish in, not being the spade, essentially. Which lots of people just feel they've got to be the spade. And then you create.
Yeah, and creating the environment where people feel comfortable that they can, you know, express views about things, and they're not going to get bashed down in meetings. And too often people kind of set up teams where there's a lot of, you know, you can't have argument or disagreement about things. And I think that comes from leadership, and it's always down to kind of the leader to set the framework for in which people can feel comfortable to kind of express themselves. And it's often a failure of leadership when people start talking behind one another's back, or not coming up with the right answer because they're afraid of being told that they're wrong, or these types of things.
Yeah.
How do you?
But I don't know if I'm going to slightly disagree that it's a failure of leadership, because I think it's a failure of everyone in the team. Like, I know that it's a kind of like, the lead is a big one, but I think everyone's got a responsibility when they go to work to look at the team and change. Like, I think a lot of people go to work in this kind of very passive way and think that a manager or a leader should change their environment to make it better. And it's like, if you don't like what you see, then change it. It's not like you can't. It's just people might be held back by that. And you know, again, if anyone's listening and you're working in a crap environment, well, change it. And actually just have a bit of courage, because you know what? If you can't change it, then the worst will happen is that you end up leaving that environment, and that's not very good anyway. So it's a win-win. So why would you ever be quiet about that? Just makes no sense.
And that kind of goes back to exactly what we were talking about at the start, which is people don't do that because they want to belong within the environment that they're in, and they think that it's their failure. They internalize the failure of not fitting in or not feeling comfortable as something that they're doing wrong, whereas it might be often the kind of leadership within that organization that's making them feel that way. And courage is a key thing there. And whether it's, you know, changing the whole environment, or maybe just, you know, making one other person in your team feel like, you know, I'm with you, we feel comfortable together. That's leadership too. Everyone can kind of perform the role of being a leader within their environment.
And create bubbles, you know, like if if the rest of the organization is toxic, then create a little bit of the world, your corporate world, that isn't toxic. And then what you start to see is when that happens is that people start to notice that that bit is functioning better, and they start questioning, well, why is that bit functioning better? And very often it's about protecting the people, and as leaders you need that protective embrace, really, that you put around the team to say, right, okay, we're going to make sure that if there's anything outside that's going to interrupt or hurt this team, or just get in their way, then they've got to get past me first. And that's what real leadership is. And it's not obstructive, it's just protecting the team from stuff that they don't need to worry about, because you need to be that shield. And then when they need to feel stuff like maybe a bit of heat sometimes around delivery timescales and stuff like that, still important even in Agile, then you don't just let the door open, you're the filter, and you help the team and you coach them to get to that. You don't just let the door open and let the horrible stakeholder in to have a go at them. And that's what real leadership is. It's about how you it's not about being weak and just supportive. A lot of people, there's a kind of rise of the Agile coach, which, Agile coaches are wonderful. I'm one myself. But an Agile coach is not somebody that just creates this lovely environment that everyone walks into and they don't have to do anything all day. Like, clearly that isn't going to be an environment that lasts very long, especially nowadays. So it's about creating an environment where it's supportive, but it's challenging. And the challenge comes not from you as the Agile coach, but from the team. And that's servant leadership. But servant leadership isn't about just going, oh, I'm just going to be really, really supportive and I'm going to be like a really high paid PA, which is what I see quite often. It's about you are the challenge. You are the person that has got to filter all the challenge that's coming in from the organization and then filter that through to who needs to hear it, but in the way they need to hear it. That's your job.
And it's also, but not it's hard to strike this balance where you're setting the challenge, but you're passing it over to other people to be the accountable ones for pushing themselves. So like asking more questions like, do we have extra capacity to take on this other thing, and setting the vision of wanting to be high performing because everyone has a stake in it, and everyone feels like they want to do it because of just accountability for wanting to do a good job. And
they don't want to let everyone down. Absolutely.
And being accountable to one another rather than just accountable to the leader. But I think everyone really wants to do, even in big organizations, if you're working in a small organization, a startup, maybe you have a kind of stake in the outcome because you have some ownership. But even in big organizations, I think everyone generally wants to feel like they're, doing great work, and they're valued in some way. Because like you say, it's 8 hours of the day, 5 days a week, and it's it's a big part of your life. So if you go to work every day thinking, how can I do the minimum, it's usually because, you don't feel valued. So you kind of fight against that, or just, you feel apathy towards it.
Yeah, most people don't. I mean, it's very, very rare that people go to work to do a bad job. I mean, that's quite hard to do as well. It's quite hard to just go to work and sabotage everything. It might feel to you like everyone else is sabotaging your work, but they're not. They're trying to do the best job they can, and it's worth bearing that in mind in the COVID crisis, that everyone's got their stresses. You've got yours, but everyone you talk to is dealing with their SHIT behind, and quite often you can hear it now, which I find not entertaining from the perspective of that I enjoy hearing other people's distress, trying to do work with children in the background. But I think one of the things that's really been a good thing out of this crisis has been a couple of good things. I hate to say it, obviously massive disaster and awful, but we got to look for what can we salvage from this. And one of the things we can salvage is the fact that there's now a load of blokes that go, yeah, I kind of understand what a woman's going through now when she's on the phone and she's going, darling, yes, go away, sweetie. yes, yes, because they've had to do it now. They've been like, yes, hello, sweetheart. Yeah, yeah, you're now on camera. You know, the amount of conference calls now where you get this little person come along. I've had so many now, and they just end up on my lap, and I'm just like, okay, right, turn the video off. How can I get rid of her now and send her off to daddy?
Well, but that also, yeah, but that also goes back to the just be yourself type thing. We're going to do much better job if we treat one another as humans rather than this kind of corporate slave just one-dimensional version of ourselves. And I think a lot of organizations would do a lot better if they didn't try and pretend like people were this standardized model that was created in industrialization, and we just actually accept that everyone's human and everyone's got their own challenges going on at home, but everyone's trying their best, and they'll just need to communicate as much as they possibly can, whether things are going right or things are going wrong. And that's life.
Yeah, and you see this though, because I think one of the things that that you get with like men and women is women are a bit more open, obviously, to their emotions. So in a working environment, I have a colleague actually and a friend who she's like, someone who will probably know the names of my kids before they know why I want the job in an interview and stuff. And she's like, she's got to a point now where I think she's a bit like, oh, maybe I should tone it down a bit. But I don't think she should, because I think there's an element that particularly blokes in a tech environment, without being massively stereotypical, you don't get as much about the person. It's very much like, I'm here to do a job, and I have to say my husband's like this, so I understand it. He's like, why would I tell my colleagues about my children? Why would I tell them what I did at the weekend? I'm here to do a job, and I'm just gonna, it's kind of quite, it's very, very process driven. But actually, you lose so much when you go to work like that, because why can't you have friendships at work? I mean, I'm not saying that everyone has to be your best mate, but you need to have a level of a pheasant has just sorry, a pheasant just
nice
went past the window. In fact, two. It was looked like a male and a female getting on.
Oh, wow.
It's a good job
socially
it wasn't
socially
that way. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was a good 3 feet. So you have to have some level of relationship with someone to have a team. It's like on a netball team or a football team, right? It's what happens in the breaks that bond that team. And it's when the team stays together as well. So when my netball team has the same people in the same spaces, we do great because we know what we're doing, and it's just like it gels. But when we have to mess with it, like someone has a baby or someone is injured, then we have to mess with the formula, and that always results in a bit of like, oh, it's a bit awkward because people don't know each other, didn't know you were going to throw it there, and there's an element that happens on teams, right? So until you know someone, and that's why at Magic Milestones we do this stuff. There's some don't want to give it away on live on a live podcast. Is it still a podcast when you can see them? I don't know.
I don't know. They need a new name for this.
But anyway, I'm giving secrets away.
Webcast. Okay, go for
Webcast is how it is. So I'm going to give a secret away. So it's really easy to bond a team really quickly, and you do something where you've got to be careful what questions you ask, right? But if you just ask like a fairly innocuous question, like, what was your biggest challenge growing up? And you just ask your team that. You provide a safe space for them, right? You don't just do that in the middle of the office. But if you're in a room and you just say that and you get everybody focused, you'll be amazed at what comes out. And some people might even be quite uncomfortable about what they say. And you have to say, before you say the words, like, you don't have to say anything you don't want to say here. But it'd be nice to hear your stories.
Yeah.
And I always, if I do that as a facilitator, I always share mine. So I always talk about a little bit about my life and my story. And, I have an older sister, and I grew up in the Black Country. I have a chip on my shoulder because I grew up in the Black Country, and for a long time people can understand what I said. You probably relate to that, being Scottish. It's like I lived with a Scottish guy in London for a while, and we were fine. We used to use, he was Glaswegian, and we used to was he Glaswegian? No, I think he's no. He was.
Aberdeen.
It's a long time ago. He was either Glaswegian or from Edinburgh. I think it's Glaswegian, and we were fine when we were both sober. But as soon as we got drunk, I couldn't understand a word he said, and I'm pretty sure he couldn't understand a word I said either. So we used to kind of go to the pub, and after the pub, we'd go back and have a whiskey or something, and it would just be like, and we'd be having a great chat.
I'm pretty sure my accent was a lot stronger. I'm from Glasgow too. And I think it's definitely toned down over the years.
Oh, you're very easy to understand. You're not like in fact, he was called Phil too. You don't sound at all like, well, you sound a little bit like he did when he was sober, but he was a bit stronger accent than yours, and my accent was stronger back then too, because I think as you get older, you live or you work in different places, and your accent changes. But yeah, it's kind of like, but I used to have a real chip about it because people honestly couldn't understand me. I remember when my husband met my nan, who's a proper black country wench, bless her, God rest her soul, and he literally could not. Sometimes he can't understand what my dad says still. So there's still that kind of black country dialect. It's not, if you're Welsh or Scottish, in other areas of the UK as well, there's kind of a dialect that goes along with the accent, and it's actually not the accent that makes it hard to understand, it's the dialect. And that, unfortunately, that dialect is kind of dying out now with it going past. It's a bit of a shame, isn't it? But you have to be understood.
I think these chips on shoulders or like kind of insecurities in teams, as soon as you start sharing your own, people just I do the question, but sometimes I don't even ask people. I just start sharing, and I just start talking openly about family, or I quite like just telling people stupid things that I've done. I did and it doesn't. I think because I'm confident, I'm not afraid that people are going to judge me for, and I know that everyone's made mistakes, or everyone's kind of got faults of some description, and it makes people feel comfortable when you're kind of leading a team or you're part of a team with them to know that you're not pretending like you don't have any faults or things that aren't perfect. And as soon as you share those things,
like admitting I was fired in about the first 2 minutes of the webcast. I should add, by the way, that I didn't do anything wrong or illegal. It was a genuine project didn't work. They moved the development team to Leeds and not Birmingham because it wasn't financially viable, and I was quite grateful for that. But anyway, I think that's the thing. You've just got to create trust. That's the key thing. And if people trust each other, they're not going to be ripped apart. And it's a hard thing to create, weirdly. But it does take someone like you or me to just kind of open up and share stupid stuff like, the fact that I don't know.
Your kids were about to be sitting in on this interview before we go on. Oh, like that builds trust between people, and
because they realise what's going on.
Yeah.
With you.
What's over time? Have you dealt with kind of ups and downs of the business? Then, like you said before, that there was the financial crisis, and how have you kind of, I guess, gotten better at running your business and things over these experiences? Yeah.
So over the 13 years there's been big ones, and it's really funny because the data tells the story as well. So in the third year of Magic Milestones, we hit 1.2 million really easily. So I remember the feeling that I got, like I was a very rich 29-year-old. Like I was kind of like, this running a business is really easy. I went to Singapore and bought a Mac on the way back, just like ridiculous. And I thought, I don't know why everyone's on about with this business stuff. It's really easy. It's really easy to make millions of pounds. I don't know why I didn't think about this before. But of course, yes, it is. First of all, when you're I wasn't single, but when you're not married with children, that's easier. So when you're young and kind of you'll work any amount of hours because you've got nothing else to do with your time, frankly. when there isn't a global financial crisis. So that's the thing. You've got to think, if you run a business, if anyone's listening, they run a business, they go in 3-year cycles. Like someone told me very early on, the financial cycles are 3 years long. So even if you don't hit a major recession, I mean, I have to say I'm quite unlucky that I've hit like 2 major recessions in 13 years. That's pretty unlucky. But I was very lucky in that I hit the dot-com boom, and that's where I am today. Why I'm where I am today, because of the dot-com boom. So, you know, you ride a wave and you fall under a wave in equal measure. But it's every 3 years. So the first 3 years of the business were amazing, and I was just rocking it. And then in 2011, I think it was. So 2008 was when the global financial crisis hit. But what lots of people don't understand, that yes, it hit, but then the lack of capital at a good price took years to get through the system and impact it. So it's not like now where this impact is like immediate. So it's fascinating from an academic perspective, because this is a major, like, whoosh, that's a whack. And in some ways
it was great before.
Sorry?
It was great before, and then all of a sudden it's just like hit.
It's just crazy. Yeah. But in a way that's kind of preferable, because a big like whack, and with a recovery that's linked to something that people can say, yeah, when that happens, there'll be a recovery. That's actually a better situation. That means you're going to have, I mean, I'm no economist, right? So this is the health warning. But with a pandemic, you either get that, or you get that, or you get that. But no one's ever had that after I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, having looked into it, that there's no pandemic that's gone that, like that. So they always either they mostly end up in a V, but this is a U, right? We're unfortunately in a U.
I think the tricky thing with this one is, they've never had a vaccine for a coronavirus. So it's like there are these predictions about September. We're now in June, and we've been we're just coming out of lockdown. People are going crazy on beaches. Enjoying themselves, coming together, not really socially distancing, and the big fear is another wave of the pandemic, and we'll all have to go back into lockdown again. And the problem is, but the problem is that my concern about this is that, you know, that a lot of the media might want to say that there's going to be a vaccine because it gives people hope, but it might just linger on for a long period of time, and it will change kind of life and the way that people operate for a long time. I mean, the airports and airlines, they might have to have seats which are separated, reduced number of people in restaurants. What does that mean for the hospitality industry that has such slim margins? A lot of it's really unknown how long this is going to last.
Yeah, but on the bright side, pandemics normally last for 2 years. I think that's kind of the average. So HIV, so we were already in a pandemic. That's probably what people don't realise, is HIV was from the 80s to now, and we're still in it. So yes, it's managed, but we're still in a pandemic. And did you know that, I think it's don't quote me on this, but I think about 2003, Algeria had bubonic plague. So it's like, you know, these things that only one person got it apparently, but there's been times when like 10 people have got it and stuff. This is crazy. This is like the stuff that should make you worry. So these pandemics are happening all the time. There was one in the 70s in the UK, it was Hong Kong flu, which sounds like, you know, sounds funny, but it probably wasn't. And these things, you know, they hung around for 2 years or so. So hopefully we've hit the most of it, but it's going to be in our lives for a couple of years. But the thing is, if I'm going to make a prediction, again, I'm not epidemiologist. It is an epidemiologist, isn't it? I've got the wrong thing. It doesn't mean someone's feet or something. It's like I'm a bit of a Mrs. Malaprop sometimes late at night. I'm like, I did say the right word, didn't I? So, but the thing is that life will change because there will be other outbreaks, and we've learned our lesson now. And if you lived in Asia, then you were already on this train. You already knew there'd been SARS. You already knew it was coming, but we haven't had it really. We had swine flu, That should have taught us a lesson, and it didn't. But there will be more, and it will change how we. But I could only think of good reasons why this is going to be better. I mean, I know if you run an events company, then this is pretty hard, or a big bar or something, you know, or a big live events venue. This is hard. I mean, I'm not going to underestimate how hard this is for people in tourism and all those sort of things, and everyone. But maybe we just need to pay more for the privilege of having more space when we go and see, you know, one of these bands like Ariana Grande or something, you know, like maybe you just need to pay more money to do that. Maybe we weren't paying enough, and that's why we were shoved in like sardines.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the airlines, that's the flights, the cheap flights that we're all enjoying will just come down in price, or they'll go up in price, but just less people will travel. I guess that's going to be good for the environment as well. I think just on the point that you were saying about the pandemic, I'm actually super happy that we've had this COVID-19 come along rather than one which is both very transferable and very deadly.
Ebola meets COVID-19, yeah, that would be a nightmare.
It could have been, but this is like a dry run for you know what's inevitably going to come, which is one which is, you know, the real deal, essentially. I mean, it's terrible for everyone whose parents or like older relatives have died at this time, but one that kills like young people in the prime of their life. We need to be prepared for that. So, you know,
the kids thing. The kids thing is the only thing I think that a lot of us. Have you got children?
No, I don't know.
Well, I think the only thing that kept us sane as parents was the fact that you knew your kids were relatively safe.
Yeah.
Because if I'd have been going through this thinking my children were at risk, I'll be honest with everybody here, I would have fallen apart, because I can cope with my business falling apart. It's just money. It's just, you know, it's people's lives too, right? It's scary and it's horrid, but that's all just money. It's stuff you can get back. Dealing with my parents, they're older, like we can isolate them, all that kind of stuff. But if this was something that threatened my children, then I would not have been able to cope with it. It would have been like, you know, lock me away for 2 years and my kids are never going out, because that, you know, that pretty much the overwhelming desire to protect your children is so powerful. And the idea that we're meant to be letting them out now and going to school is just hilarious before we've even you know, the idea that my 3-year-old's going to nursery, like before I can even really, you know, go to the pub or anything, it's just, you know,
it's crazy.
It is crazy.
I think a lot of this comes down to us as human beings thinking that we can control everything and we can just destroy the environment and do whatever we want, eat bats, you know, just not really consider our role in the world and within nature, and just think that we can solve everything with science. It's funny, like science is amazing in so many ways, but we're all just hanging around here expecting people to create a vaccine or some sort of antiviral so that, you know, it's going to give us a get out of jail free card, when really we should
so we can carry on screwing everything up. And it's just like, and you know, the world needed a deep breath, and we had to, you know, to a certain extent pay the price for what we've done to it. I hate to put it like that, and like I say, it wasn't the people who died that you know, they didn't deserve it, of course, but as a human race, we knew, and leaders knew, that we were on borrowed time, you know. So we, all this stuff had already been, it was already there in the background, it had all been said, and we did not heed the messages, essentially. So we are where we are. But it's good. We'll get out of it. We'll sort it, and we'll realise, hopefully. I'm an optimist, can you tell?
Well, you need to be.
We will.
And I think it's the difference was it's like optimism isn't like you don't see the problem. It's just that you're looking for the silver lining, or somewhere, you know, the opportunities that come from things, you know. And that's a choice.
Yeah. I wasn't when this happened. I wasn't given that I'd gone through the financial crisis before. So going back to that, I mean, in 2011 was when it hit us, and I literally lost half of my staff. They all left because we didn't have any work for them, and I became pregnant at the end of that year. And I had a plan. I sat down with two senior people and said, "Oh well, obviously I'm hoping that you guys are going to take over." And they kind of looked at each other, and then 2 days later, they'd both put in the notice, and they were already thinking along those lines, right? So overnight, I just lost half the business. I lost the two people who were apparently going to keep my business running while I had my first child, and I just thought, what the hell am I going to do? So that one of the first things is that I would not take my grandfather's advice and say, don't have a business partner. I think have a business partner, but have the right business partner. So I've got an awesome business partner now who's really, there's a good yin and yang going on. So, right. And, but I've had business partners before where it hasn't quite worked out, yin and yang, it happens. But it's easy to think, well, then I should just be on my own, But actually, it's really hard to choose a business partner because it is pretty much like, they have as much control over some of the stuff you're doing as your husband does or your wife does. So it's not something you should go into lightly, and also you shouldn't be surprised if you get it wrong potentially, because
it's also not something. It's like you don't go, I want to be a painter. I'm going to find somebody to help me paint this painting. It's like your vision. You're the one that's going to create it, and it's the same with company building. I think, where it's like hard to have a joint vision on a lot of things, even if you communicate really well with one another. It's hard to like put what you think it should be aside because of, and let somebody else take it.
Yeah.
Do you guys split the responsibilities pretty evenly and try to avoid, because I know that that's one strategy for kind of having a good operating relationship, is to kind of split things and be clear about whose responsibility is what.
Absolutely. So in the past, where I kind of went wrong was I kind of just thought that, and this is a kind of narcissistic element to this, which I apologize for in advance. But it's very easy as a business owner to think you've got to replace yourself, because that's kind of how the rhetoric comes when you go on these courses or you speak to mentors. There's a lot of kind of like, you have to replace yourself in the business and be working on the business, not in the business. So in your head, you're thinking, well, I've just got to find a replica of me and that will all be fine. But that's not actually the way it works. If you do that, what you find is that you just get another person like you who you are just like, okay, well, they have all the irritating things that I have, and that isn't helpful. Like, right? Also, they might have the same skill set as you. So actually, if you're looking for like sales and their project management, and then you're both project managing the hell out of a company when you need a salesperson. Luckily, I'm a salesperson too, but you kind of have to be. But with Josh, my current business partner, he's nothing to do with what I do. He's actually a recruiter by trade. He's built huge tech teams. That's what he does. That's what he's brilliant at. I can't do that. But why would I go into partnership with somebody who can do what I do? What's the point of that? It's a bit like my husband. It's like, he's an early morning riser. Like, he's really annoying. It's probably going to annoy everyone. But at 5:30 meditates, and then at like 6 o'clock he goes and does weights, and then at 9 o'clock he's just annoying. But it's helpful because in the morning he's getting that stuff done, and I'm allowed a lie-in, and then I'm up at 8 o'clock on podcasts, and I'll probably spend another couple of hours finishing my work off and making sure I'm ready for the morning. And normally I'm the one putting the kids to bed. If they're ill, I've got it. I can exist on 2 hours sleep. He can't. He'll just be like a disaster zone. So you have to find somebody just like a marriage who can be the yin to your yang. And if you don't have that, then you're probably better off by yourself. But isn't it better to have, to share the load? It's so much better, especially in a crisis like this. It's nice to be able to bring someone up and go, God, this is shit, isn't it?
Especially you end up sharing it with like you want your family to be kind of separated or insulated from the craziness of business. And
I have to say, yeah, and a lot of women do have businesses with their other half, but there's a good reason for that because of the family thing, because it's really hard. So if you don't have a business with your husband, you have to carve everything up in other ways. So one of the things I'm always really happy to do is to kind of share if there's like someone who's 29 and they've got a business and they're thinking about, well, how the hell do I have kids in all of this? Well, the first thing is have kids with the right person. That's a really good first step, because you have kids with the wrong person and it will really impact your ability to do work, right? They've got to be part of the team, right? And vice versa, if you're a bloke, female, that's how it has to work. But then it's kind of like you've got to make sure that, so divvy up the things at home, but also just be aware that, it's different, slightly different for men, but as a woman, but it does impact men too. But as a woman, you are uniquely going to be impacted more, obviously, because you've got to have the child, and you'll probably, I don't know, maybe you'll have some maternal feelings that mean you want to do all the usual stuff. So you've got to create a plan for that. And I think a lot of people, I don't know about, people have kids and they don't have plans for kids. Generally, it's not what we do. It's not what we do in the UK. So maybe they do elsewhere, I don't know. But weirdly, as an entrepreneur, you've got to look and say, well, okay, so I'm 29 now. I want a kid before I'm 39, let's say. So what does my business need to look like when I'm not in it? And the first time I shed loads of money and put someone in who was highly competent and just, totally just ran it for a year, and that was great. And the second time I decided to do it differently and have a team run it. But, each one of those has its pros and cons. First one is more expensive. And if you've got to do it twice, that can be pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But it's worth doing. I actually think it's worth doing. It's worth paying for somebody to take it off you.
Yeah.
But it's also about making sure you've got the right team in place before you have the child. And it's about making sure that you aren't central to everything in your business, because otherwise you won't go off. You'll be off for about 6 weeks and right back in again.
Yeah.
Which is some people's cup of tea, but not mine.
Yeah. A lot of people kind of feel like they have to be in their business all the time because it's like an extension of them. But it's almost like, I heard once somebody, it was like, you don't have a business if it can't run without you. You've got a job.
Yeah. Totally. And, so, and that's the thing that I managed to get it to run for a year without me, and that's quite hard emotionally as well. So you think it's hard coming back to your job when you come back off maternity leave in normal circumstances, but it's pretty hard when it's your business and someone else is sitting in your chair in the building you own, and they're the boss, and you're actually kind of reporting to them. That's tough. You've got to leave your ego at the door.
Yeah.
You've got a really hard time. To do that, actually not feeling that confident either, because you're coming back after having a kid and your whole life's changed. So I think, to people who are looking at this and saying, well, I'm 29 now, what's going to happen? It's like, just talk to lots of people who've had kids, particularly, if you can find female entrepreneurs. I'm available at steph@magicmilestones.com. If any woman or bloke for that matter who's thinking about having a kid and has got their own business and they want to know what the resilience plan is, I'll give you that for free, because you know what, you don't have to go through that pain. So, and the other thing is make sure you're financed correctly. So make sure you've got your business has got cash. That we were really lucky because the business has done really well, so we had lots of cash. But then Brexit happened. That was the other thing that you asked me about. Sorry, 58 minutes in, and I've just gone for the second one. I'll try and make this brief. Brexit hit us really hard, got to say, but I made sure we had the cash. I made sure. I think that the longer you're in business, the more you can see these icebergs coming, and you just go, right, we just need to make sure we've got a steel hull so this thing doesn't take us down. And then
in what way did it hit you?
So totally drying up most of the large programs. So imagine, like, we don't have jobs, we don't have a thing if people don't do big, horrible, large programs that mean that Magic Milestones have got to come in and help deliver because they're horrible. And even though we're in technology, there was a lot of that going on, that people stopped doing that really innovative stuff. I think there's a big frustrated backlog of that stuff, actually, because people weren't doing it through the Brexit years. And obviously I was having my kid as well, my second kid during all this, which was not helpful. And then COVID hit right at the end of that process.
Yeah.
And weirdly, COVID was probably a walk in the park compared to the Brexit effect.
You could feel things just starting to heat up, especially in technology. People kind of, the financial crisis and the residue of the financial crisis had ended, especially for the banks. That's kind of the background that I've got.
Yeah.
They'd had to resolve a lot of things for, regulation, recapitalization, these types of things, and that was the decade. And now, just moving into this decade, we thought that it was going to be all about technology and innovation and blockchain and new kind of platforms coming out, and this just came out of nowhere.
And you know what though? It will be, because of COVID. All that innovation is happening.
Yeah.
Totally happening. It's just accelerated it.
The number
and that's
of people,
what's amazing.
Yeah, the number of people that I speak to. I mean, even this podcast, or just or UCast, or whatever it's called. But but like the number of people that I speak to, and they're they're doing something creative. They've started a Facebook page where they write essays, or they're just anything, just things that people have been thinking about, strategizing about, wanting to do for a long time, and then they've just decided, what, screw it, why not? I'll just do it right now, because there's no better time than time when you've got more, you don't have all the distractions of things that you think you need to do.
Yeah, book proposal. I did a book proposal 4 weeks ago, finished that, despite having kids and despite running a business. I was like, go me. That was my little manic bit that I did in the middle. I'm quite proud of that. So yeah, watch out for the book. Stable teams beyond agile methods.
Stable teams. Like it. Nice. What else? We're kind of at an hour. What else did you kind of want to talk about, Steph?
I think I'm almost done, but give me a killer question. What do you think is? Give me a hard one, and I'll end the podcast with that.
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Yeah, well.
What is this? Is this your purpose? Is magic milestones your painting? Is this kind of what you thought that how your life was going to play out when you were, say, 29? And what is it that you think you want to achieve with the rest of your life that you haven't really been able to do so far?
Well, this is what's really funny. It might sound a bit weird, but I think people see their lives of this kind of endless kind of striving, right? And for me, it sounds a bit twee, but I've got 2 amazing children, and that was one of the things when I was a kid growing up, that I really wanted kids, and that was a kind of absolute, I wanted them. I'd have been devastated if I couldn't have them, but just me, quite maternal. And I didn't really, I grew up in the black country, right? I thought I'd be lucky if I earned 30 grand and I worked in an office, I'd be like, fine, So to get a degree, I got a degree from Bristol Uni in philosophy and theology, which basically qualified me for nothing. And people used to say, do you want to be a nun? Mm-hmm. I'd be like, no. But at the same time, a little bit like, what does that mean I actually need to be? And then I was lucky enough to get sponsored by the BBC to get a master's in computer science. So I totally changed tack. So I've done a lot of stuff, and that was, I've done that stuff, and then I set up a business. Like, a lot of people are kind of striving to set up a business, and for me, like, the business is a double-edged sword. Like I say, there's always the yin for the yang. It's amazing. Like, I can't say enough. It's amazing. I live it. I do what I like, pretty much. Well, I've got clients. Everyone's got a boss, right? Mm-hmm. But it's a good life, but it's a hard life. It's not like I'm sat, like, sunning myself all the time. Like, I'm here now at 9:15 on a Wednesday night, and time isn't finished yet. But that's the life I've chosen, and it does mean I can flex around my kids, and my kids can see me, and they've always been able to do that. I had an office next to my house for years. That was great. And I could only do that because I could craft my life in a way that supported what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But is it my painting? Nah, it's not my painting. It's just something that I was fired, and then I thought, well, this is good. And someone paid me 500 quid a day for it when I started out. And I was like, I was ringing my dad going, you won't believe how much money they're paying me to have this conversation with you. So, you know, at the end of the day, I just kind of fell into it a little, I suppose. I mean, you know, I had a background in this stuff, right? I worked hard, but it's probably not my painting. But I don't. We'll see. We'll see what the next thing I've got passions. I care about the environment. I'd love to do something. I'm a fan of Elon Musk, not his tweets, obviously, but I think he's a genius. So I love that, and I feel very passionate about women and their role in society and the economy. But with a big but, that we have to take men along for the journey. Like, the men have got to be central to all of this, because we won't get equality in the boardroom until we get it in the home, and we won't get it by telling men they're all shit and, you know, and telling them to check their privilege. That's just, that ain't going to work. That's not, if you look at change management, that's not a good way to get your change done, to tell everyone to, you know, wind their necks in. Yeah. It's not a great way, you know. Yeah. So I think we need to work together, and you know, it's a man and it's a male and a female world, and if women want a better world, then they've got to craft a world with men as well, and work together, and there's plenty of men that want a better world for them. I mean, this crisis has brought out the fact there's plenty of blokes who are saying, thank God I'm seeing my kids every day. I was hardly seeing them, and they'll be saying to themselves, do I want to go back to an office and commute for 2 or 3 hours a day and not see my kids? No, I don't want to do that. So we've got to build a working world, especially, that's better for everyone, and create that empathy. So I believe in that, and you know, who knows? So I might have a little brainwave one day and do that, but I don't believe in this thing that everyone's got to do exactly what they love. Like, I love playing the guitar. I like hanging out with my kids. I like going walking for the woods. I've got into nature. You know, hence the pheasants. You know, I saw an owl the other day. It was bloody great, but I don't want to. But I'm not interested in going and finding owls to look after. It's just like stuff I like, right? So find. You know, your purpose is great. Like, make sure you enjoy what you do. So don't get me wrong, I absolutely bloody love it. I love what I do. It's fascinating. I love teams. I love the dynamics. But it's not. I wouldn't call it my painting. My painting is something I do in my own time when I have my, you know, my relaxation, my time. That's cool.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's also one of the reasons that I set up this show with Unplanned as the title, because too often it's always too planned. People always kind of think things through, like, oh, I've got this painting, and they sketch every last line before, and then it's like paint by numbers. They just fill it in for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And you know, that's not the best way to live life. I guess it's just to kind of take opportunities, follow your curiosity, you know, do what excites you. You know, if you feel like changing direction, quitting something that's not enjoying you, or that you're not enjoying, then that's okay. Just, you know, don't judge yourself. These types of things.
And be grateful. My parting comment is be grateful, because if you, and I know it sounds a bit, again, it might sound a bit twee, but gratitude is, you know, it's kind of big in Sikhism and Hinduism. But if you practice gratitude, then that striving that you feel, it kind of, it's helpful, right? But you've got to get the balance between gratitude and that striving feeling, because if you're striving and it's actually impacting your day-to-day life, and you're not seeing your kids and all that kind of stuff, then what are you striving for? Just makes no sense. So look at your life now, and look at the COVID-19 crisis, and there's that whole thing about, what are you going back to? Is it worth it? You know, is normal worth going back to? And be grateful for what you can get out of this experience, as much as you can, given the awful things that are happening. But you know, many of us have smelt the air when it isn't polluted. Many of us have heard the birds. So why should we go back to normal?
Seen the sunsets.
Totally.
So beautiful.
Seeing your kids.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, listen, thank you so much for making the time, Steph. It's been awesome.
It's been fab. Yeah. Absolutely. And
awesome.
We need to have another coffee soon and talk about the other stuff, defo.
For sure. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Nice one. Have a good evening.
Speak soon. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.